In the previous episode, I discussed bone physiology and I briefly mentioned the maximum growth proposed by Frost. Our task now is to define the relation between the characteristics of a certain strain and the adaptive response. Basically, find a way of measuring and quantifying stress in a way that allows us to reliably predict how will bones respond. Thankfully, this has all been done for us. So let me introduce you to the concepts of mechanostat and strain, as well as bone's maximum and minimum effective strain values. Welcome to the fourth episode in the most elaborate evaluation of bone smashing. I will present you with a lot of interesting information in this episode. Unfortunately, as of today, I haven't been able to integrate this information fully into the practice and figure out all of its implications. That is partially the reason I'm making this. I think what I'm about to share holds potential for the looksmaxing community. These concepts are somewhat similar to that of Mike Iseratel's minimum effective, maximum adaptive, and maximum recoverable volume from the Advanced Hypertrophy Concepts and Tools series. Could they be used to make a periodized bone smashing regimen in a similar way to Mike's RP training? I don't know. I'm a single individual and I can't smash my face enough to test everything out I would like to. I simply want to bring out some of these ideas, and maybe as a community we can make the best of it. Mechanostat is what translates mechanical stimuli, a physical phenomenon, into a biochemical signal that instructs bone cells to remodel the bone in such a way that it gets stronger when faced with the same stress in future. It is performed by Osteocyte. It provides your body a capability of adapting to physical circumstances it finds itself in. After we learn the intricacies of this, we will be better suited to control the process in a way that results in an outcome more conducive to our goals. That is because we will find out the exact minimum amount of force needed to induce growth, thus proving bone smashing works. The primary type of bone cell, osteocyte, acts as a sensoring cell. Their role is mechanosensation, congruent with mechanotransduction, or the ability to detect and interpret strain. They are shaped in an elliptical-like structure connected via fluid-filled channels called lacuna canicular network. Mechanical stress that changes bone geometry also changes the lacuna canicular network, and that can be detected by osteocyte. Resulting biochemical signals after this process are intended for effector cells or osteoclasts and osteoblasts. These signals instruct them on the remodeling and modeling processes that need to happen in bone. There are also aspects of electric fields caused by stress-generated streaming potentials and hydrostatic pressure, but again, extreme details aren't very relevant here. What is left now is to figure out how to quantify mechanical stress using the unit strain and define the function that expresses bone's response dependent on typical strain characteristics. That function will show us how much strain needs to be applied on facial bones to prompt a hypertrophic response from them. From there, we will proceed to questions of how to apply the strain the best way, where to apply it for intended results, and frequencies of application and possible periodization methods. Quantifying resulted mechanical stress is done using the unit for relative deformation, aka strain. Strain is a measurement of object distortion compared to its original length. If you take a 100 cm metal rod and you compress it by 1 cm, you've just created 1% strain. In osteology, microstrain, which corresponds with 0.0001% of original length, is typically used. In real life, any stress put on your bones creates a deformation, whether that be you lifting weights, getting hit by a truck, or standing on your feet. The difference is the amount of deformation determines the adaptive response of bone, aka will it break or just strengthen it or even just do nothing. We know the exact boundaries of each as defined by Harold Frost, but it's not that simple that we can just take a look at a single instance of stress inducing a strain in a certain bone and reliably predict the adaptive response that is about to ensue. With that, we find ourselves in a need of defining a somewhat abstract theoretical term that will be mentioned a ton later. Mechanical usage history, although it doesn't have a definite meaning, for all our purposes, it can be interpreted as the commonly experienced mechanical stress by a certain bone during proximal past. Somewhat of an average mechanical usage, but not quite. Mechanical usage history is outlined by Frost with 3 rules, which are the following. First, modeling does not respond detectably to rare large bone strains, provided they do not damage the tissue. Second is it responds to some time average value of typical repeated peak strains equal to or larger than the minimum effective strain for modeling. That is often referred to as loading history. Third, lesser strains than the minimum effective strain have no presently detectable effect on modeling, no matter how frequent. Noting that the last one was brought into question by new research since Frost proposed the idea. Nevertheless, this abstract term will allow us to reliably predict effects that our smashes will have. You might be asking yourself how so? Well, this is where the fucking graph that's been everywhere comes in. What do all these acronyms stand for? What value each axis represents? And what does it all mean? Frost and colleagues through research calculated the function expressing bone's response dependent on typical strain characteristics, telling us depending on where on this graph the typical strain or mechanical usage history falls, the adaptive response that we can expect a certain bone to experience. Starting off with the disuse mode, strain range threshold, or the MSR, if mechanical usage falls underneath MSR, the maximal disuse mode activity occurs, aka bone atrophy. So you can think of it as sort of a maintenance volume. Anything above this threshold will at least preserve existing bone, and it stands at 50 to 100 microstrain. MSM is the bone's genetically determined modeling strain range threshold, in and above which modeling usually turns on to strengthen a bone. It's equal in the realms of muscle hypertrophy as the minimum effective volume. Loading histories above 1,000 to 1,500 microstrain were shown to initiate bone formation. Repeated bone strains cause microscopic fatigue in bone called microfractures. Normally, bone detects this, and the remodeling process provides the ability to repair it. A point after which the accumulation of microfractures suppresses bone's physiologic recovery ability is called MSP. Above it, unrepaired microdamage begins to accumulate, but also when MSP is reached, the lamellar bone formation is replaced by woven bone formation. It stands at around 3000 microstrain, and its equivalent would be a maximum recoverable volume. Maybe we could periodize our bone smashing and make it so that we dip into this area slightly before a deload as to not risk accumulation of microfractures and the consequent fracture, but we still get a heightened hypertrophic response from this range. Last strain landmark is Fx, and it's a pretty simple one. It is just bone's ultimate strength above which it fractures, around 25,000 microstrain or 2.5% deformation for healthy bone. Force required to inflict this amount of strain is quite big. In weaker bones, such as the lateral orbital rim, injuries can occur, but you need to be really responsible and dumb to hit that hard. Even UFC fighters don't come down with bone fractures very often, and they are subjected to much more dangerous forces than you should ever use in bone smashing. I quickly want to take a look back at MSM and examine the implication of disuse mode for our bone smashing. It is activated when bones stop experiencing stress to which they are used to and have adapted to strength-wise. If we achieve bone hypertrophy by an increase in mechanical usage, we increase the strength of our bone, and thus we increase MSM as it sits at 4% of Fx. Thus, when mechanical usage is reduced or discontinued, we can expect the disuse mode to activate. That would mean that gains you achieve through bone smashing have to be maintained by providing at least a maintenance volume, meaning bone smashing might be a lifetime commitment if you want to keep the gains. On a lighter note, if you notice something is developing unevenly and in a way you don't like, stopping the stimuli and letting it atrophy might work possibly. It is hard to extrapolate this from the literature and would be better if tested IRL, but my guess is that around 3 to 6 months after a significant bout of mechanical usage that leads to modeling is what it likely takes for bone to return back to its pre-stimulated structure. Although the longer you bone smash and the more progress you make, I think your gains are of higher likelihood of staying permanent. And if not permanent, the situation will probably be similar to muscle, where maintenance volume, where atrophy does not occur, is just very low compared to the volume needed to grow the muscle. Keep in mind that none of this is certain, just like almost everything in looksmaxing. How long atrophy takes, and does it even occur? I don't know, but I think it is likely to be the case. Now that we defined bone's adaptive responses caused by a certain typical strain history, we should, at least in theory, be able to calculate the exact force needed to bone smash safely but effectively. That will be done by calculating pressure needed to cause exact deformation that falls in between aimed strain landmarks defined previously. We can do that by using the equation for linear deformation and Young's module. After that, we need to take into account pressure is a product of two variables, force and area. That leaves us with those two to play with in our bone smashing endeavor. If we standardize area to, let's say, 1 mm square, it leaves us to figure out only the force that is needed, and that will be covered in the next episode. So until then, enjoy.